I was waist-deep in my lake when Sharon Blackwood, the self-appointed HOA tyrant with a clipboard for a soul, came stomping down my dock like she owned the sunrise. The water was cold, but her trespassing violation froze the morning harder than the lake ever could. One second I was breathing in peace, the next I had a surveillance creep pointing her phone at my face like she was conducting some dawn raid. She shouted that I owed her $2,000 for swimming in shared water resources, which was HOA language for whatever fake enforcement she felt like manufacturing that day. I blinked at her, wondering if I'd somehow sleepwalked into a power-drunk nightmare. But no, this was real. This was her, and she was about to escalate. Before we move forward, drop a comment. Where are you watching right now? Because what Sharon did next turned this quiet lake morning into a full-blown retaliation war, but that's not even the half of it. She waved her violation notice like it was federal law carved into stone. My lake, my land, my water. And here she was, acting like I'd broken into her swimming pool. I climbed onto the dock, dripping and irritated, and she didn't even flinch. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked like she was holding her skull hostage. Her tone was colder than the water I'd just crawled out of. She told me I had breached Section 7.3, a bylaw she recited with military precision, even though it didn't apply to private lakes. She kept filming, documenting me as if my morning swim was a crime scene. Every word out of her mouth was a weapon. Every glare was an intimidation attempt. And the worst part? She enjoyed it. Here's where everything blew apart. I told her the lake wasn't communal. I told her it sat fully on my deeded property, which she didn't bother pretending to care about. She insisted the HOA had reclassified it under Resolution 2019, a document I would soon discover didn't exist except in her imagination or her husband's home-printed fake legal templates. She clicked another photo of me, like I was a wild animal violating her kingdom. My jaw clenched hard enough to crack. The rage didn't hit like a wave. It hit like a rising tide, slow, high, inevitable. She said the board would review my case, as if stepping into my lake was an act of war requiring administrative hearings. She turned and walked away with the smug confidence of someone who had bullied countless neighbors into submission. Her heels clicked across my dock like a countdown. The moment she disappeared behind the trees, the shift happened. Fury sharpened. Control returned. A decision formed. Back inside my cabin, I pulled up property records. My lake sat squarely inside my boundary lines. Not overlapping, not shared, not ambiguous. My land, my water, my rights. The HOA bylaws? Section 7.3 didn't apply. It was meant for communal ponds, not privately owned lakes. The violation she threw at me came from pure abuse of authority, manufactured rules, fake enforcement, malicious intent. And as the minutes ticked, the deeper anger settled into something sharper. Purpose. 3 days later, the letter arrived. Official HOA letterhead. Official formatting. Unofficial fraud dripping from every line. Sharon fined me $2,000 for unauthorized water usage during restricted hours, plus $350 in administrative and legal consultation fees. She was shaking me down, testing me, seeing if I'd fold like everyone else. But she had miscalculated. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't lost. I wasn't someone she could steamroll with HOA cult tactics. Not today, not again, not ever. I dug through records for hours. County laws, HOA corporate structure, water rights statutes, land surveys. There wasn't a single legal pathway for the HOA to reclassify my lake. Not one. Resolution 2019? It was never filed, never passed, never existed. It was a dead idea they abandoned years ago. resurrected only in Sharon's personal crusade to expand her fake kingdom. It was her signature move: trespass the boundary, fabricate authority, and punish anyone who resisted. She thought I'd be another victim. She thought wrong. I emailed her formally disputing the violation. Within 10 minutes, she sent back a threat disguised as procedure. Pay by September 30th or face escalated penalties and potential lien action. The mask slipped. The clipboard parasite revealed her real face: petty, manipulative, entitled. And the best part? She put it in writing. The escalation I needed. The proof she didn't think twice about. That night, while Hugh walked his dog under the porch light, he saw the letter in my hand and sighed like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Sharon got you too, huh?" He told me stories. 3 years of families drained by fines. Fines for mailbox colors. Fines for garage parking. Fines for breathing wrong near Sharon's imaginary property lines. Anyone who fought back got crushed by another violation, or 3, or 20, a harassment escalation cycle, a pattern of psychological warfare disguised as community oversight. Hugh called it what it was: her racket. He handed me a stack of financial records he'd quietly collected. Overcharges, conflicts of interest, suspicious contracts, payments funneled to her husband's renovation company. The deeper I looked, the angrier I became. This wasn't petty harassment. This was organized theft, HOA mafia behavior, and now she wanted to drag me into it. But they had no idea what was coming next. I didn't buy this cabin for drama. I bought it for silence. After the divorce, after the burnout, after years suffocating in a city that chewed me up and spat me sideways, I wanted one thing: peace. 42 acres wrapped around a lake so still it felt like it held its breath with me. I rebuilt my life one morning at a time. Walks to the dock, coffee in the cold air, long hours consulting from home, where nobody demanded anything from me. For 6 months, this place was the first stretch of ground that didn't take something from me. It felt earned, sacred. And that's exactly why Sharon Blackwood targeted it. People like her sniff out peace the way wolves sniff out weakness. The quieter you live, the louder they want to invade it. The first time I saw her was from a distance. Black Mercedes rolling past the neighborhood sign like she owned oxygen. The kind of resident who didn't wave, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge anyone without a clipboard title attached. I figured she was just another HOA enforcer who'd memorized shrub heights and thought it made her a public servant. I didn't know she'd built a throne out of intimidation attempts, fake regulations, and legal threats she barely understood. I didn't know she'd turned the HOA into her personal hammer. I didn't know that in Lakewood Estates she wasn't just a resident, she was the ruler, a power-drunk board of one, and every neighbor had learned to bow or break. I came here thinking I'd left control battles behind, but as soon as that fine letter landed in my hands, I realized something essential. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you defend. And Sharon had spent years becoming the exact kind of enemy I'd avoided my whole life. The clipboard parasite, the backyard stalker, the surveillance creep who patrolled at dawn taking photos of people like she was scouting targets. Hugh told me she walked the neighborhood every morning cataloging infractions, fabricating violations, issuing warnings nobody challenged because everyone who tried regretted it. Her husband's renovation company got every contract, her friends got leniency, her enemies got crushed. And now she'd tried staking a claim on my lake, the one damn thing I owned outright without compromise. I kept digging into the bylaws because I needed to know what she relied on. What gave her the confidence to walk onto my dock at sunrise and scream about fines like she was deputized by the Constitution? And the deeper I went, the more absurd it became. The bylaws were basic. Mailboxes, fences, nighttime noise, nothing close to water rights. Nothing about lakes. Nothing granting the HOA jurisdiction over private natural features. Section 7.3 clearly referred to community ponds, not lakes on deeded land. Sharon's power came from bluster, not law. From intimidation, not authority. From fear, not fact. But Hugh was right. Most residents didn't have the energy to fight her. And that's why she'd lasted. I researched HOA jurisdiction laws until sunrise. State statutes, county zoning records, land and water rights, easements, boundaries, everything. Every line of text came to the same conclusion. The HOA had zero authority over my lake. Zero. No loophole, no technicality, no way for a board vote to override property law. Sharon had fabricated Resolution 2019 out of thin air. She'd lied to my face, lied in writing, lied to the community. And she thought she could keep lying because nobody had ever dragged her into a corner before. The more I uncovered, the more something inside me shifted. The grief-shaken version of myself that moved here after losing everything began hardening into someone I hadn't been in years, someone with teeth. I remembered why I came here, not just to escape, not just to heal, but to rebuild, to reclaim control, to have something that was mine, something nobody could twist or take because they felt entitled to it. But a bully doesn't care what something means to you. A bully only cares what they can get away with. And Sharon had gotten away with too much for too long. Her kingdom was built on silence, on neighbors too tired to push back, on people who believed her when she weaponized bylaws like they were scripture. But the moment she stepped onto my dock, she crossed a line I wasn't letting her walk back from. I stood outside that night, staring at the lake. Every ripple reminded me why I wasn't going to roll over. My life had been stripped bare enough times that I knew exactly what loss looked like. This wasn't loss. This was theft dressed as procedure. She wanted to take what gave me peace. That made her dangerous. That made her worth fighting. And I fight differently now. Quieter, sharper, more deliberate. Because when you've already survived the worst, a clipboard tyrant doesn't even register as a threat. She registers as a target. Hugh warned me she'd escalate if I pushed back, that she'd get louder, meaner, more invasive, that she'd hunt for weaknesses, manufacture violations, rally her fake profiles online to smear me. But his warning didn't discourage me. It confirmed what I already knew. Sharon only understood resistance as a challenge to her power, and challenges made her sloppy, predictable, exposed. Every tyrant overreaches, every tyrant leaves fingerprints, and Sharon had left hers all over lake rights, finances, bylaws, and intimidation campaigns. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just angry, I was prepared. I had documentation, deeds, maps, statutes, witnesses, and a rising fury she wasn't ready for. She thought she'd shaken me. She didn't realize she'd woken something instead. A ripple crossed the lake. A wind moved through the trees. And a thought hit me with the force of a decision already made. She tried to drag me into her game. Now I was going to rewrite the rules. But she had no idea what was coming next. The deeper I dug into Lakewood Estates, the more the whole neighborhood began to look less like a community and more like a hostage situation being run by a petty dictator with a clipboard and a god complex. Sharon Blackwood wasn't just president of the HOA. She was the HOA. Every rule, every fine, every accusation, every fabricated violation had her fingerprints all over it. She didn't enforce bylaws, she weaponized them. She didn't guide the neighborhood. She stalked it like a surveillance creep waiting for someone to breathe wrong near a property line. It wasn't community oversight. It was a power-drunk board operating as a one-woman HOA mafia. And all of it existed because no one had ever confronted her with anything stronger than a polite complaint. That was about to change. For the first time, I examined the HOA structure with surgical focus. Not emotionally, not reactively, strategically. This wasn't about a lake anymore. It wasn't even about the $2,000 fine. It was about understanding the machine she controlled and how she used it to crush anyone who dared challenge her authority. And the more I understood it, the more monstrous it became. Sharon chaired every committee. Sharon approved every invoice. Sharon selected every contractor the HOA hired, which always turned out to be her husband's company charging luxury rates for mediocre work. Sharon controlled the newsletter. Sharon moderated the community forum, which meant deleting anything that contradicted her fabricated narratives. Sharon even wrote the meeting minutes, crafting her own history in real time. It wasn't governance, it was dictatorship disguised as organization. Hugh had warned me, but the documents were worse than the stories. Late-night reading turned into full-blown disbelief. Rejected bids from legitimate contractors replaced with inflated invoices stamped with her husband's logo. Board meeting votes recorded as unanimous, even when half the board wasn't present. Fines issued without hearings. Resolutions passed without quorum. It was a fortress of illegitimate authority held together by fear, apathy, and her relentless harassment escalation. And the moment anyone pushed back, she manufactured a new violation, a new threat, a new fee, a new act of psychological warfare. She conditioned the neighborhood into obedience. And yet it wasn't enough for her. People like Sharon always need to expand their kingdom. They need to trespass into new territory to feel whole. They need to stretch the limits of their fake enforcement until the boundaries snap. Which is exactly what she tried to do with my lake. Private property didn't matter to her. Deeds didn't matter. Law didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was whether she could get away with it. And she had gotten away with everything. Until she picked a fight with someone who documents everything, questions everything, and refuses to surrender ground. Someone who'd already lost too much to lose one more inch. Claire, the single mom who'd been fined $1,200 because her kids dared to play outside, came by after Hugh's visit. She was quiet at first, unsure if she could trust me. Sharon had turned neighbors against each other for years. But when she saw the letter Sharon sent me, something shifted. She'd seen that tone before, that intimidation pattern, that deliberate cruelty masked as procedure. She told me she'd been fined 5 times in 6 months. Noise violations, yard clutter, improper holiday decorations, all nonsense, all invented, all meant to pressure her into silence. Sharon targeted anyone without money or influence, anyone she thought wouldn't fight back. But Claire was done being afraid. She pulled up her phone and showed me the neighborhood forum. Sharon had already posted a photo of me swimming, captioned with some fabricated nonsense about disrupting quiet hours and disturbing neighbors. The comment section was split. Half the community supported me. The other half? The same dozen accounts posting the same recycled praise for Sharon's leadership. Every profile was created within the same 3-month window. Every profile posted only on HOA topics. Every profile existed solely to defend her. Fake accounts, manufactured consensus, digital intimidation. None. The more I studied her methods, the more obvious her patterns became. She operated like a cult leader with a clipboard, isolating victims, spreading misinformation, punishing dissent, rewarding blind loyalty. Her power came from the illusion that she wasn't alone, that she had supporters, enforcers, allies. But she didn't. She had sock puppets, she had fear, and she had a community too exhausted to fight her. But exhaustion wasn't my weakness. It was fuel. I compared my property survey to the original HOA plat map. Hugh was right. Sharon had been claiming land the HOA never owned. She'd redrawn boundaries in her head and enforced them like scripture. She expanded HOA territory without authority. She had violated state statutes. She had trespassed into private ownership without even understanding how blatantly illegal that was, and the deeper I went, the more her empire cracked. Hugh dropped off a box of documents one night. Bank statements, emails, handwritten notes scribbled in the margins of invoices, all stamped by Sharon, all showing patterns no legitimate board would tolerate. Overcharges, conflicts of interest, kickbacks, payments labeled as consulting fees for work that didn't exist, double-billed maintenance jobs, and the real kicker, charges to the HOA for legal reviews of bylaws that were never updated, money disappearing into channels that always traced back to her. Every document was a confession in disguise. Claire contacted a retired contractor from 2 streets over. He compared Sharon's invoices to market rates and nearly laughed. She wasn't overcharging. She was robbing people in broad daylight. Some jobs were billed at triple the standard rate. Some weren't performed at all. Some were duplicates. All were fraudulent. All were part of her system. And all of it connected back to the same person. The neighborhood hadn't been living under an HOA. It had been living under an extortion network with a nicer letterhead. I realized then that this fight wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my lake. It wasn't even about the fine. It was about every neighbor she had intimidated, drained, cornered, and silenced. It was about restoring something bigger than property rights, dignity. And when I looked at the evidence stack, I understood the truth with complete clarity. This wasn't a dispute. This was racketeering wrapped in HOA language. And I wasn't going to just defend myself, I was going to expose her. But she had no idea what she just triggered. Once I realized what Sharon had been running, the entire neighborhood transformed in my mind from a quiet cluster of homes to a battlefield covered in buried evidence. Every file, every invoice, every email felt like a landmine waiting to blow her operation apart. And the more I dug, the more explosive everything became. I wasn't just uncovering misconduct anymore. I was uncovering a blueprint for organized theft, masked as community standards. Sharon hadn't stumbled into corruption. She had engineered it with precision, and she had no idea I was assembling every piece into a weapon. I spent nights scanning documents, taking notes, cross-referencing dates, and creating a timeline of her abuses. What I found wasn't a series of mistakes or oversights. It was a pattern, a structure, a system designed to funnel money and power into her hands while bleeding homeowners dry. It began with harmless-looking bylaws. Then came the targeted fines, then the contract manipulation, then the intimidation, then the smear campaigns, and finally the financial siphoning that had gone unnoticed for years. The deeper I traced her signature trail, the more it became clear. This was racketeering wearing a cardigan, HOA tyranny disguised as administrative oversight. I brought everything to Andrea, my lawyer, expecting her to confirm I had a strong case. But when she finished reading through the evidence, she didn't just say I had a case. She said I had a criminal enterprise, fraud, conspiracy, abuse of authority, illegal reclassification of property, unauthorized use of HOA funds, kickbacks, financial misrepresentation, and a pattern of intimidation that crossed the line into harassment with malicious intent. Andrea wasn't shocked. She was furious. She said it plainly, without flinching. This isn't an HOA issue anymore. This is a RICO situation. Hearing it out loud snapped something into alignment. All the clues I'd been collecting suddenly sharpened into a single picture of who Sharon really was. a wannabe cop running a micro-dictatorship inside a gated neighborhood. A petty overlord who thought a clipboard and a title made her untouchable. But she wasn't untouchable. Not with what I had. Not with what Hugh and Claire had brought me. Not with the paper trail she'd been arrogant enough to leave behind. And not with Andrea ready to take her apart piece by piece. But discovery wasn't just happening in documents. It was happening in whispers. One by one, neighbors began coming forward once they heard someone was finally challenging the HOA mafia. A retired teacher fined for unapproved flowers. A single dad fined for non-compliant bicycles left on his porch. An elderly couple fined for weathered siding during a 3-month period of storms. Each story mirrored the same pattern. Fines issued without warning, penalties added without explanation, hearings denied, appeals ignored. The fear was the same in every eye. The relief was the same when I told them they weren't alone. Sharon hadn't bullied isolated victims. She'd bullied an entire neighborhood. Claire cracked the next piece of the puzzle. Her IT background let her analyze the HOA email archives and website metadata. That's when she found the fake profiles. Not just a few, dozens. All created around the same time. All using similar phrasing. All used to defend Sharon, harass dissenting homeowners, and create fake support for her initiatives. Digital manipulation, community perception engineering, manufactured consensus. Every fake comment praising her leadership, every post shaming residents who questioned her, every online argument she participated in through burner accounts. It all pointed to one thing. Sharon didn't just want power. She needed the illusion of loyalty to make her control look legitimate. The discovery phase exploded when we found the financials from 3 years back. Payments marked as consultation fees going directly to her husband's company. Invoices tripled, unauthorized transfers, duplicate charges. And then, hidden among monthly statements, 4 unexplained wire transfers that didn't match any HOA expense category. Andrea traced them to a law firm known for representing multiple HOAs in the county, a firm with a suspicious pattern of rubber stamping Sharon's actions, a firm that billed thousands for legal reviews that never took place, a firm that had been quietly feeding Sharon legal cover while pocketing inflated fees and returning kickbacks. The corruption wasn't just deep, it was wide. Sharon wasn't acting alone. She was propped up by professionals who saw the HOA as revenue, not responsibility. And they'd been bleeding the community without resistance, until now. What broke everything open was a piece of evidence I never expected to find. A handwritten note in Sharon's planner, one Hugh had saved years ago when she left it at a community picnic. Scrawled in the margins were her priority targets, homeowners she considered non-compliant, problematic, or potential risks. Next to each name were notes about where they worked, whether they had kids, whether they were likely to fight back, and what angles she could use to pressure them. It wasn't management, it was stalking, coordinated stalking with intention to intimidate. But the moment everything shifted, the moment discovery became proof, was when I scheduled a meeting with her and slipped a recorder into my jacket. I wasn't expecting her to confess, but she did. She couldn't help herself. She bragged about tightening control. She admitted to targeting difficult residents. She admitted to issuing selective fines as behavior correction. She laughed about people who complained. She even slipped and mentioned that Resolution 2019 served its purpose whether it passed or not. She incriminated herself in a single conversation because she believed she still had power. She believed I was just another resident she could intimidate. She didn't realize the walls were already closing in. When I played The recording for Andrea and the neighbors who'd joined the fight. The room went silent. Not because we were shocked, but because we finally had undeniable proof. The kind of proof that ends reigns, the kind of proof that topples tyrants, the kind of proof that turns a neighborhood uprising into a legal detonation. We weren't just preparing for a fight. We were preparing for collapse. Her collapse. And it was coming faster than she realized. But here's where everything blew apart. The annual HOA meeting was supposed to be routine. Bylaws, budgets, boring updates. That's how Sharon had kept everyone compliant for so long. Make the meetings dull, make the process confusing, make herself the only person who understood the rules. But this time the room wasn't filled with boredom. It was packed with tension. Residents who normally stayed home showed up early. People who hadn't spoken in years sat shoulder to shoulder. The air hummed with anticipation. Sharon walked in with her usual arrogance, clipboard tucked under one arm, lawyer trailing behind her like a shadow. She didn't know the ground beneath her was already cracking. She didn't know the documents were stacked, the witnesses prepared, the recording waiting like a loaded trigger. She didn't know this was the last time she would ever preside over anything again. She opened the meeting with the same hollow speech she always used. Reminders about community harmony, vague warnings about rule enforcement, thinly veiled threats about compliance. But the tone was different. People weren't cowed anymore. They were watching her like she was a defendant, pretending to be a queen. Hugh waited until she took a breath, then stood. The room fell silent, every head turning, even Sharon's. He didn't ease into it. He didn't warm up. He went straight for the center. Motion for a vote of no confidence in the HOA president. Sharon froze, but the room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a sudden electric shift. Her face hardened. The facade cracked. She tried to laugh, tried to dismiss it, tried to wave her clipboard like a scepter. But nobody bowed this time. I stood next, lifting the stack of evidence. My voice was calm, controlled, deadly. I laid out the surveys proving the lake was private property. I laid out the HOA plat map showing she'd fabricated boundaries. I laid out the financial statements showing fraud, kickbacks, and manipulation. Every page was a blow. Every document peeled away another layer of her authority. And she felt it. She paced. She snapped. She tried interrupting. She tried shouting. But every time she opened her mouth, another resident shut her down. For years she'd ruled by intimidation without anyone daring to speak. Tonight the dam burst. Then I played the recording. The moment her voice spilled through the speakers, laughing about targeting residents, admitting to selective fines, bragging about control, the entire room shifted from shock to fury. Neighbors she'd humiliated for years stared at her with a rage sharpened by long memory. Claire stepped forward next. She exposed the fake profiles. She explained the metadata. She showed how Sharon had impersonated neighbors to intimidate others and manufacture support for her own tyranny. The crowd murmured, growing louder with each revelation. A retired contractor followed her, breaking down the overcharges, the fraudulent invoices, the pattern of theft. His voice shook with anger as he described Sharon's husband's inflated bids. People who had doubted the rumors finally saw the truth laid bare. Sharon tried her last defense. Blame. She accused us of forging documents. She accused us of conspiring. She called Hugh unstable, Claire vindictive, me dangerous. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. The lawyer beside her looked like he wanted to disappear. And then the moment came. A quiet grandmother from the corner stood and said, "You fined me $600 for wind damage after a storm. You said I refused to maintain my property. You made me cry." The room went silent. Sharon couldn't hide behind procedure anymore. She was face to face with the people she'd harmed, and every story hit her like a stone. The new evidence kept coming. Affidavits, bank statements, emails. Everything she'd created to maintain her power became the rope that choked it out of existence. She tried to regain control, banging her clipboard against the table like a gavel she didn't actually possess. But authority isn't noise, it's credibility. And she had none left. Residents began shouting for her removal. Some demanded she resign immediately, others demanded she repay the stolen funds. Someone yelled, "Call the authorities!" For the first time in years, Sharon wasn't in power. She was cornered. She stormed out, her lawyer scrambling to keep up, her composure gone. Her exit wasn't graceful, it wasn't strategic, it wasn't controlled. It was a retreat, a collapse, a petty tyrant fleeing the throne she built on lies and intimidation. And when the door slammed behind her, the entire room exhaled at once. The tension broke. Hugh and Claire stepped forward. The board voted unanimously to strip Sharon of all authority. Her fines were voided, her decisions overturned, her contracts suspended. The neighborhood chose transparency, reform, accountability. It wasn't just change, it was liberation. But the collapse wasn't over. Not even close. Because when someone like Sharon loses power, they don't walk away quietly. They claw. They threaten. They lash out in desperation. 3 days later, I woke up to an anonymous email dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you've started." It didn't scare me. It confirmed everything. Sharon wasn't just losing her grip, she was spiraling. Her foundation of fear had cracked. The walls around her empire were falling, and she knew I was the one who lit the fuse. But she had no idea what was coming next. The moment Sharon's empire collapsed publicly, the fight shifted from neighborhood politics to criminal exposure. I wasn't dealing with an HOA tyrant anymore. I was dealing with someone who had spent years laundering fines, forging authority, and siphoning cash under the cover of community management. Her anonymous threat email didn't intimidate me. It confirmed that she finally understood the truth. She no longer controlled the narrative, the board, or the fear she once fed on. And now it was my turn to take the fight out of her playground and into the territory she couldn't manipulate. Legal, forensic, undeniable. She had played queen long enough. It was time to show her the courtroom didn't bow to clipboard royalty. Andrea, my lawyer, took the evidence pile I'd assembled and transformed it into a legal warhead. She coordinated with a forensic accountant known for dismantling financial schemes. The accountant didn't waste time. Within days, she mapped every fraudulent transaction, every inflated invoice, every suspicious wire transfer that flowed between Sharon, her husband's company, and the law firm enabling their extortion racket. Patterns emerged like bruises. Money funneled in predictable arcs. Residents charged 4 times the standard rate for repairs. Duplicate billing across HOAs. Consultation fees that led to shell accounts. It wasn't incompetence. It was organized exploitation, crafted by someone who thought homeowner ignorance was a weapon she could wield forever. The accountant's findings weren't just damaging. They were devastating. Nearly $127,000 unaccounted for across multiple years. Invoices altered post-signature. Records overwritten. Funds moved in and out of accounts timed suspiciously close to special assessments Sharon imposed on the neighborhood. Every number was another nail. Every inconsistency, another fracture in her already crumbling facade. The accountant found ties to a dozen HOAs in the county. Similar billing patterns, identical contractor lists, repeat signatures. It was a network, a system, a multi-community fraud empire disguised as homeownership governance. Sharon wasn't a rogue president. She was part of a machine. Andrea escalated everything. She contacted the district attorney. She submitted complaints to the state's Department of Consumer Affairs. She filed a request for an emergency injunction to freeze HOA funds until an independent audit could be completed. And when she presented Sharon's recorded confession, a casual admission of extortion tactics, selective punishment, misuse of funds, the DA didn't blink. He opened a criminal investigation. Subpoenas flew. Investigators appeared at doors. The law firm that had shielded Sharon started to splinter as attorneys scrambled to distance themselves. And all the while, Sharon kept sending threats, empty ones, desperate ones, pathetic ones, but they only fueled what was already in motion. Neighbors who once whispered stepped forward boldly now that they weren't alone. Statements poured in, witness testimonies, photos of Sharon trespassing onto properties she had no jurisdiction over, emails where she fabricated complaints, screenshots showing burner accounts, checks written out to her husband for emergency repairs that never happened. Every piece of evidence was another domino tipping toward the inevitable. The DA's office didn't treat this like a petty housing dispute. They treated it like organized crime. The investigation expanded like wildfire. Sharon's husband was caught falsifying contractor reports. Their lawyers were caught receiving kickbacks disguised as legal reviews. Old board members who'd resigned came forward, admitting they'd left because Sharon refused to follow any procedure that didn't benefit her personally. Some told investigators they feared retaliation. Others admitted they stayed quiet because Sharon threatened to bury them in fines. It was all the proof the DA needed to connect the dots into a fully engineered scheme that went far beyond Lakewood Estates. And still, she tried clawing her way out. She filed counterclaims. She sent cease and desist letters. She spammed the community forum with rants about lies, slander, conspiracies. But her voice lost its power. Her threats lost their teeth. She wasn't an authority anymore. She was noise. A collapsing tyrant screaming commands nobody obeyed. She could stomp. She could deny. She could lie. But she couldn't stop the forensic audit. She couldn't stop the subpoenas. She couldn't stop the law from knocking on her door. Then came the phone call I'd been waiting for. The forensic accountant found something bigger than kickbacks. Far bigger. A series of payments labeled as discretionary emergency legal funds, all funneled into a private account tied to the same law firm representing multiple HOA boards. The accountant said 11 HOAs had identical structures. 11. Same fee patterns, same signatures, same inflated rates, same mandatory repairs that conveniently required Sharon's husband's company. It wasn't just local fraud. It was county-wide corruption. When the DA heard it, everything accelerated. Investigators raided the law firm. They seized Sharon's records. They interviewed board members across neighborhoods. It wasn't a dispute anymore. It was a RICO case, and Sharon was at the center of it. For the first time since she'd walked onto my dock with that smug dawn swagger, the power shifted completely. She wasn't the hunter anymore. She was cornered prey, not feared, not respected, exposed. And the moment she realized this wasn't just civil, this was criminal, she went silent. The clipboard tyrant, the surveillance creep, the petty overlord. Silent. That silence told me everything. Her power trip had ended. But the humiliation? That was still coming. The courtroom didn't care about Sharon's clipboard. It didn't care about her fake authority, her staged confidence, or the brittle arrogance she'd used to crush an entire neighborhood for years. In court, she wasn't a president. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't a queen. She was a defendant sitting beneath fluorescent lights, while the truth she'd buried under intimidation, forged regulations, and fraudulent invoices rose around her like floodwater. Watching her face during the trial wasn't satisfying because she looked afraid. It was satisfying because she looked small, smaller than she ever allowed herself to appear, smaller than she ever allowed anyone else to feel. For once, the system she twisted finally twisted back. The prosecution laid out everything: the fraudulent fines, the financial siphoning, the extortion tactics, the intimidation routines, the burner accounts, the fabricated resolutions, the illegal reclassification attempt on my lake, the kickbacks from her husband's renovation company, the law firm's involvement, the multi-HOA embezzlement scheme. Every document she'd signed became a confession. Every intimidation attempt became a pattern. Every lie became evidence. When the recording played, her voice bragging about correcting resident behavior, mocking homeowners she targeted, admitting she weaponized fines for control, the jury didn't even look confused. They looked offended. They looked disgusted. She tried to rewrite reality, the same way she rewrote meeting minutes and bylaws. But you can't gaslight 12 strangers. Not when the paper trail burns hotter than any argument she could make. Her lawyers tried everything. They blamed rogue contractors. They blamed miscommunication. They blamed bookkeeping errors. They even tried blaming overly sensitive residents who misinterpreted firm leadership. But none of it survived contact with the facts. Not one witness supported her. Not one neighbor defended her. Not one document contradicted the fraud. Every time her attorneys tried redirecting blame, the prosecution countered with another forged record, another inflated invoice, another coerced fine. It didn't take long for the jury to see what the entire neighborhood already knew. Sharon wasn't a misunderstood leader. She was a predator who had finally run out of places to hide. When the verdict came, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She just stopped moving. 7 years in federal prison for wire fraud, racketeering, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Her husband got 11. The lawyers involved got more. Their firm dissolved. Their assets were seized. Their reputations evaporated. The HOA, our HOA, was awarded restitution. Residents who'd been drained finally got relief. The money she stole came back to the people she stole it from. Not all of it, but enough to undo the damage. Enough to restore something she spent years destroying. But victory wasn't a celebration. It was quiet, controlled, deliberate. The new board, Hugh as president, Claire as treasurer, rebuilt the association from the ground up. Transparent books, open meetings, fair rules, real accountability. The kind of community Sharon always pretended she was creating, but never allowed to exist. For the first time since moving here, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield or a kingdom. It felt like a home. A year later, I walked down to the lake at sunrise. The same lake where she thought she could stake her claim. The same lake she tried to turn into her jurisdiction. The same lake she used as the opening shot in her attack. The water was cold, perfect. Hugh was already there, dipping his toes in like he was relearning what freedom felt like. Families gathered at the shore with towels and laughter. Kids ran with inflatable tubes. Someone fired up a grill. It wasn't a party. It wasn't a victory parade. It was normal. The kind of normal we hadn't tasted in years. I stepped into the lake, letting the cold cut through the quiet, and for the first time, the place felt exactly like it was supposed to feel. Peaceful. Untouched. Mine. The HOA wasn't a weapon anymore. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't something lurking around the corner waiting to strike. It was just a structure, a system, a tool, and tools only hurt people when tyrants get their hands on them. Sharon had built her empire on fear. I ended it with evidence. She built her authority on silence. I shattered it with truth. She built her power on the backs of neighbors too tired to fight. I handed that power back to them. After everything, one last vote remained. The board gathered, reviewed the new budget, and approved a restructuring of dues. Transparent, legal, fair. And because of the fraud recovery and reallocation of funds, we adjusted one final line item, administrative fees. The same category Sharon used to bleed the neighborhood dry, except now they were doubled, not to punish residents, but to rebuild reserves and prevent future exploitation. Her favorite weapon was now a document reminding everyone how quickly power collapses when abused. I looked out across the lake, watching neighbors swim freely in the water she once pretended to control, and the ending came to me with the same cold clarity that carried me through the entire fight. HOA went dead silent.